My grandmother, Harriet Eleanor Holden, who married John Eliot Oldham, was a very important figure in my life. Her only child was my mother, and she took a special interest in me and my brother. We spent every summer of our lives until we left home with her on Squirrel Island for at least 2 months. She spent a lot of time with us at Christmas and other holidays. We usually had a week that we visited her in Wellesley Hills, where they lived, in the spring. And she had a very strong personality. And she and my mother, frankly, didn't get along that well because she tried to control my mother's life a good deal. She was a very estimable woman, but of course I also ran up against her when I was a late teenager and only accidentally found out, because my father told me something that might help, found out how to get along with her. And then we were very, very close. What happened, she had a lot of meaningless little tasks that you had to perform every morning about how you laid your bed back before you ate breakfast, and then, nonsense. And I was not at an age that I wanted to do this. So we fought, and it was terrible. And then my parents were both leaving Squirrel Island, and I was left alone. Because my brother was in Colorado then. I was left alone with my grandmother, and I said, what am I going to do? And my father said, well, it has to be this way, so you just do the best you can. And remember, it isn't the whatness of what you do, but the whenness that bothers her most. Well, that was my father's.
The whatness versus the whenness.
Yeah, that was my father's way of expressing things. And the very first morning that I was alone with her, I came down to breakfast after having laid my bed back, where I had never done that before. I laid it back, went down, fixed myself some breakfast, and I started to wash the dishes. Grandma said, don't do that, go up and lay your bed back. And I said, I did. Well, she didn't know what to make of it. Well, she said, go up and make it. I said, right. So I went up and made it. Then I came down and did the dishes. I started to do the dishes, and she said, no, I think you should go out and play. Go out and get some sun. And that was the beginning. Then I discovered that if I gave her a hug, she just melted in my arms. And we became so close, she hugged me back. And she had not really expressed her emotions, her positive emotions, freely until that time. My grandfather, estimable man as he was, had a very cold side. He did not know how to express himself at all emotionally. He never could say what he really felt. And I think she felt cheated in some way, but obviously she could never say that even to herself. So when I came along and I gave her these big hugs, she went crazy. We became so close and such good friends and remained that way until she died. Yeah. And it just happened overnight like that.
Because you turned the bed back before breakfast.
Yeah.
And gave her the hug.
Yeah, and that was it. I mean, sometimes when you think about human relations, it's incredible how little they're often based on. Well, I went to Smith College because she had gone to Smith College. Class of 1893, which was, I don't know, the 6th, 7th class or so that had ever been there. And so it was very unusual for young women to go to college. And her daughter, her sister went in the class of 13, so that was 10 years later, no, 20 years later. And then her daughter was class of 18, 25 years later. Well, unfortunately, I was the wrong year. I was 44, so I couldn't do it in the same year they did. But nevertheless, when I was born, my grandmother enrolled me. She registered me on the
for
application.
college.
Yeah. It just seemed like the right thing to do. So I always had this sense of obligation to her and grandfather because clearly they were going to pay for my education. Clearly my parents couldn't have or wouldn't have, even if they wanted me to go. And so that's where that was. We had this special relationship, but we also had a tense relationship because she didn't know how to express herself in a relaxed way. And my grandfather, and besides which all the advice on how to bring up children was all putting them on a schedule as babies, that kind of thing. That was what was going around then. My grandfather didn't know anything about these things and didn't want to, really, and couldn't have handled it. So my relation to them was very unusual. This is Harriet Eleanor Holden, who married my grandfather, John Elliott Holden, who went to Smith College, and this is she at about 5 years old, I think. Can you tell from looking at this how old she is?
Oh, it looks like about 5, I suppose.
Okay. All right. Now, there are various other pictures of her, but that gives a pretty good idea. She had very chiseled features. My mother always thought that she was a very handsome woman. She certainly was a handsome child. This is she in some high school pictures.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Age 14, it says.
Okay. And this one?
It just says 1886, age 14.
We turn the page, and we get her at Squirrel Island in a play there.
1888.
1888. The reason I mention this is that, as you will learn, we believe my grandmother was actually black and that her parents were passing, both parents having been also apparently black, and nobody ever said boo about it. To me, I never suspected. But as I look at many of the photographs of her, it's quite clear that she has a black style about how she stands, how she holds herself. I see it in this. I mean, the details aren't there, but there is a quality about it. You see it even more in her brother, Hulbert, of whom there are almost no pictures, and my mother thought it was probably because he seemed too black to her, and that was probably the source of their main disagreement. Obviously, she never said anything about her origins when she went through Smith, because otherwise she would have been the first black child there. Black, quote unquote. This is a picture, by the way, of her father on a boat at Squirrel Island. Take a look at him there, and you can see this is not the style of the other men on Squirrel Island who are very...
With the one in the foreground.
He's the one on this side.
On the foreground.
Yeah, that's right. He just has a totally different style from everybody else. Okay. And certainly from his own father, as you will see when we get back into his history. We're looking at grandmother, Harriet, that is, with some of her friends on a rock, having a picnic somewhere at Squirrel Island. They had a lot of fun, as you can tell from so many pictures of them on outings. Now, my grandmother went there when she was 16. Her father, George Warren Holden, and his wife, Annie Charlotte Holden, built a house there, a cottage. One of the first cottages built on Squirrel Island, right in the center of everything, between the tea shop and the post office and the library and the casino. It had a unique place, and it was called Sweetbriar, and it was a great house. It was big and rambling, and they had lots of fun and lots of parties, and that was where my grandfather met my grandmother. Now, my grandmother, from the age of 16 on, spent her summers there, and they had pretty good times, as you can see from looking at some of these pictures. They seem to be.
Looks like fun.
Yeah, I think so. This seems to be over in Booth Bay. I don't know what they were doing over there, but there were always crowds of them there. And
this looks like a similar place where the photograph of your grandfather.
Yeah.
Later.
Yeah, well, they sprawl out in this place, and I don't know what the occasion was particularly, but they seem to do that a lot. Now, this is a picture. Grandmother is at college, at Smith College at this point, I should say. I forgot what she studied. I think she studied science when she was there. But she had a lot of interest. But the thing that she had the most talent for was actually artistic. I mean, she was very good at craft work. She did a lot of restorations of antique trays, which involved a lot of work on her part.
Was this at Squirrel?
Yeah, that's at Squirrel. I mean, we never had that much fun when we were there. But in her day, they did. I don't know whether my grandfather is in this picture or not.
Oh, yes. It's got your grandmother here and your grandfather there.
And this is the porch at Sweetbriar, their cottage, and just lolling about in the hammock. That's more of that Booth Bay stuff. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. There was a lot of pictures taken that day, I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, they were into this. Now, this seems to be at Squirrel Island at the Star Cottage, which was near the casino. And I don't know whether that's preparatory to some theatrical thing or what. I mean, some of the pictures seem to be involved. People were in costume, but I can't tell.
I suppose that's your grandmother right there, huh?
Well, you would know her after seeing a few of her pictures.
The back it says something, Stanley S. Patton?
Oh, yes. Well, that was, apart from Percy Brooks, Stanley Patton was grandfather's best friend there.
And Fair Chase, 1888?
Oh, yeah, the Chases. Yeah, there was my grandmother's best friend was Fan Chase. Her younger sister, Anna, was about almost 20 years younger than she was, or about 20 years younger. This is her wedding to Lester Warren. Now, there was a Prescott Warren on Squirrel Island, and it was his wife, Emily, was a bridge expert, and so we always called her Aunt Emily, was part of the family, so, and she was quite famous as a bridge teacher. She wrote books and that kind of stuff.